Hey Anons, last night in the Appalachia thread I started talking about my experiences as a camp counselor in the Berkshires. Some of you wanted me to continue, so I'm just gonna start going. I have a lot to tell. Worked at this camp for 4 summers, had a ton of different experiences. I don't want to be too specific about a few things, don't want to dox myself, my co-workers, or the camp itself, but otherwise I'm telling as I experienced it. This is simultaneously the story of how I went from an atheistic paranormal skeptic, as they programmed us in school, to the true understanding that there is much more going on in our world than we are not yet aware of. I guess I'll start with this one. Chronologically, this is after I went as an older camper and before I'm a few years into staff. It's also the first time I really started to question what the hell was going on up there. Be me. First year on staff, kinda a spastic retard at the time. Joined because of the heavy inspiration of my favorite counselor, ran the archery area and also the weekly spooky hike. I get hired as the assistant to the shooting sports area, not just archery but rifle shooting. Trailhead for this spooky trail begins, at one end, next to the archery pavilion. Don't go on the hike until about 3 weeks into the summer, when one of other staff in my cabin wanted to go and see how they faked all the noises and spooky stuff. Gonna keep going, but also feel free to share other/x/experiences around New England. Counselor friend and I get there, help out the staff in charge, but we are mostly just watching them handle things. They give the speech about respecting the land, staying quiet, etc. We go, nothing happens all the way up to the ruins. We get there, everyone sits down, the counselors in charge start telling the stories. Cabin mate and I are told to watch the woods and listen closely. We're told to make a perimeter between all the campers and the surrounding woods. Stories going well. Obviously by now I had heard them many times and generally figured they were more legend than truth. Suddenly a loud bird-like noise screeches from trees right above us. Owl. Cuts through the silent forest. Counselors all turn on their flashlights and kids are obviously scared or at least startled. Remember thinking that wasn't a speaker. I thought they had like Bluetooth speakers in the woods and played noises, like a skeptic retard. Lead counselor stops in his tracks telling the story and asks second in command, "Okay, first owl. Do we go?" Other staff responds, "If we hear it again, we go." Kids are shitting their pants. I'm realizing that was a bird, 10 feet away, who just basically screamed at us in the middle of the pitch-black woods. Something I'm going to pause and say right here is that fear does make you see and hear things. Once I realized that the owls were not what they seemed. Cheesy, I know, but that's the best way to describe it, as if the owls that called to us up there were neither doing so due to random chance nor due to some natural behavior. I decided to start seriously investigating, or at least trying to understand why the experiences we had up there occurred. In the back of my mind, the scientific part of me always remained conscious that, with the combination of the lore around the area, the stories told, and the collective fear induced by how seriously the counselors seemed to take this, it was very likely that a lot of the spooky stuff we experienced up there was due to our fear creating things that were not actually there. Every time something like this, an owl screeching above, happened, I tried to remain as calm as possible such that I could reasonably provide myself with an explanation for why these events occurred, and why it seemed like certain people were innately tuned into whether or not we were welcome. Anyways, back to the story. After everyone calms down a bit, we resume telling stories. Maybe 2 minutes later, the same screeching noise cuts through the dark woods, and the shadow of a bird flies across the moonlit sky right over our heads. Head counselor is visibly shaken. "All right everyone, we're getting out of here. Stay single file, turn on your flashlights. Staff, get a head count." We always took a head count at the start of the hike to make sure we never lost anyone. We hustle our way out of the ruins and back down the trail. Imagine a single file line of about 30 people running through the woods with counselors at the front, center, and back, all with radios. Counselor in the rear radios, "I'm near the middle so I hear it. It's following us. Let's pick up the pace," in between his panting. We hear this and legit start sprinting over the rocks and the roots on the trail. Everyone makes it out of the woods and back to the field with the pavilion. Counselors are now in between the scouts and the edge of the woods, scanning the treeline with their flashlights. Everyone somewhat calms down and they decide to finish telling the stories. There are about 12 archery targets sitting 15 meters away, unsecured on their stands like pick related. About 5 meters behind the target line was a backdrop similar to pick related but like a heavy woven fabric, so semi-transparent. We're telling the stories still. A few minutes go by. Moon is very bright on the open field, and our eyes are adjusted so we can see the targets and backdrop very well. Suddenly one of the targets closest to the woods falls off its stand. Some of the kids gasp, or start crying. Head archery guy goes to investigate. Puts it back on its stand and sits down in the grass between the group and the targets. Stories continue. Suddenly 2 more targets fall over on the other side of the target line. Archery guy tells everyone that the hike is over, that they should go back to their campsites. Everyone gets up. I'm helping make sure everyone knows where they are going as we make our way across the field. I'm hanging out near the back of the group, still in view of the archery range. Suddenly 7 targets simultaneously fall over. Older camper in the back of the group tells everyone to run and they're now sprinting away from the range. I hang back with the staff and think to myself that the wind must have been responsible for this. Pause again. I spent the next couple weeks, and years, of my time working in the archery/rifle area, and this experience really stands out as the point when I realized something paranormal was at play. The morning after this happened I was still trying to come up for an explanation for the owl and the target thing. I figured it was a coincidence. That we were in the owl's hunting territory or something. And that the wind was able to push over the targets, or the archery dude had some sort of rope rigged around them so that he could pull them over and scare the campers. Looking back, these explanations were my younger self trying to dismiss the possibility that paranormal things do occur. Because coming to that understanding is a very hard truth to bear. Real-life Annabelle doll in her cage. Tiger pelt. Eyes followed you. There was legitimately one camera angle where the eyes were looking right at the camera, and a completely different camera angle the eyes were still looking right at the camera. Real Necronomicon. Real Wiccan books. 14-foot tall papier-mâché satanic effigy found in the woods near Dudleytown. This one creeped the fuck out of one of the staff for years. Skulls and shit that had been used for ceremonies. Anyways, TLDR, this guy was way into the /x/ stuff way before /x/ existed. Back to the story around the campfire. New staff asks what Ted thinks causes the occurrences up there. He says that depends on your interpretive framework, i.e. the natives would have called it bad spirits, other call it ghosts or whatever, and that Wiccan and other occultic frameworks have exact terminology for this stuff. Says to call it whatever you want, but know that there is generally an evil force in the area, especially around one particular foundation in the ruins. Younger staff want to have him lead a hike up there so he can tell us his own stories. He laughs again. I don't go up there at night anymore. Younger staff asks why. He begins telling another story, occurred in early 2000s. Very similar night to tonight. New staff want to go up to the area without any campers but want one of the elders who had experience to be their guide. Bunch of first-year staff start hiking up the trail. Simultaneously, two of the older staff, let's call them Will and Dave, think it would be funny to take the back part of the trail, get to the village before the other group, and scare the new staff. The trail loops around, and the ruins are at the far end. The path normally from the archery area was way closer to the ruins than the other end that looped around to the pond, but Dave taught hiking and thus knew the trail. They embark and try to hustle along the trail to beat the other group. Back to Ted and the new staff, who are making their way up to the ruins. Ted in front, walking along, and hears an owl make one call. Immediately feels as if something is wrong. Keeps going, owl hoots twice. Ted's spooky senses are kicking in. Owl hoots again, way closer, and Ted stops the group dead in their tracks. Huge bird suddenly swoops down from the trees and flies inches in front of Ted's face. He turns around and begins getting the fuck out of there. Rest of the group is left shocked, as their guide just left them and is now running the other direction in the pitch dark. They all run out of the woods. Back to Will and Dave. They kept a good pace but then hit a patch of mountain laurel like pick related. Dave swears the trail is supposed to go this direction. They start pushing and hacking their way through the brush. Will drops his knife somewhere. They keep going in as straight a line as possible. They end up in a clearing among the laurel. Will's pocket knife is laying on the ground in front of them. At this point they are panicking. Early 2000s, didn't really have great cell service. Barely managed to get a call through to the camp office explaining that they are very lost. Office clerk decides to sound one of the unused siren tones. We had sirens for fire and lost bather emergencies, and did drills weekly. Will and Dave turn directly towards the faint sound of the siren and start hacking their way through. It takes them hours to get through. Loop trail was normally 30 minutes long. They get back and get a stern talking to by the admin staff. Wake up the next morning and the whole sequence of events was so strange they felt as if it was a dream. Cuts and scrapes all over their bodies say otherwise. So Ted finishes telling us this story around the fire. Knew that Will was a real guy. Met him in my first year as a camper and ran the archery area before my boss. Go to my boss, let's call him Eric, same guy who had been running the weekly hike for years. Ask him if this story is true. Tells me it is. They Will had told it to him when he first started working there. tells me he's had his own experiences being chased out of the woods by the owls. I ask him about the night with the targets, whether he had done anything to rig the targets to fall over. Says no way, and even so, no rope could have pulled the targets over uniformly and simultaneously like that. Explains how that particular hike still haunts him, how he legitimately feared for the safety of the campers on the hike. Had never seen anything like that in his 7 years working there. At this point I had already started to understand that the night with the targets was legit. Ask him about the stories we tell the kids, if a group of scouts actually died on camp property in the 30s. He suddenly turns very serious. Opens the archery shed, pulls out a printed scan of an old local newspaper from 1934. Talks about an unknown plague outbreak in our camp. Says 14 kids died but disease was being contained. I read the article. Eric turns to me and explains that the group of scouts were literally found dead in their sleeping bags with no known cause of death. Unknown disease was a combination of the limited medical understanding at the time as well as to cover up that these deaths were very paranormal. I realized they weren't kidding about the cover-up. And that the older staff took the hike so seriously because they were convinced that these hikes could get really dangerous if we didn't respect the forest and listen to warnings that we were not welcome. At this point I had gotten close to Ted, and he had shown me his photo album and described his various experiences around New England. Some of the stories he shared from Lorraine Warren were really strange but aren't super relevant to this story. At the beginning of the next summer, I'm in charge of the archery area. Second in command for the hikes, guy who ran the program now was studying to become a priest, which unironically may have helped LOL. I talked to Ted about what I should look out for. He explains that the owls are legit, but other things that we sometimes turned around for, spider webs across the trail, newly fallen branches, probably weren't. He explains that instinct is the most important indicator, and that some people are more attuned / more capable of feeling the presence of this kind of phenomena. Explains that's a lot of why Lorraine took him on as a pseudo-apprentice, since, in her mind, he was exhibiting a high degree of awareness for this kind of spooky shit. Tell him the story about getting a really nervous feeling right before the tree fell in front of our group, like I wasn't welcome, from 28186456. He confirms that is the exact kind of instinct he is referring to, and that it is often independent of fear. Pause again. Before you believe in psychic bullshit and you're talking like you are the nobody. Shut up, LARPer. I tried really hard to understand this kind of phenomenon, that some people could be more aware of energy and flux in the world that has yet to be understood in a conscious and mathematical way. I don't know if it has anything to do with the gateway process or perceiving other dimensions or whatever, but I can, with everything that I believe, tell you that some people are able to sense this stuff, and that this premonition or feeling of being unnerved isn't some manifestation of our own fear, nor does it seem to be totally random, like pick related. At this point in my career on staff I had heard that Ted does something to seal the trail, i.e. keep the spirits in, or however you'd like to rationalize it. But basically it is to make sure that the stuff going on near the ruins didn't affect the rest of the camp. Ask him about it. Says it's real, that he burns sage and performs a specific ritual where he has to run through the entire trail before the sage is done burning. Gets his supplies from a store in Salem. Apparently there are 3 kinds of woo-woo spooky /x/shit type shops in Salem. A. The one for spiritual stasis who think they can learn magic and witchcraft. B. One that sells what seems like legit stuff. Ted noted that there are a lot of shops that seem legit, and lots of symbols around these shops. However, if he sees a pentagram in the shop, he won't buy from that shop. Apparently not all pentagrams are created equal. You can draw it with 1 point of the star facing up, or 2 points of the star facing up. If you are displaying the upside-down star pentagram, you are pledging allegiance to satanic forces. C. One that sells actually legit stuff. These look a lot like B, but have no dark pentagrams anywhere in the shop. If he sees a pentagram in that configuration in the shop, he turns around and immediately leaves. So Ted is explaining to me the ins and outs of shopping in Salem and how this ceiling works. Not sure how much is real vs mystic horseshit. Ask him how to tell, generally, what is legit. He responds in a way that, to this day, I have not forgotten. His tone gets really stern. If someone is talking about spiritual/occult stuff as if they understand it completely, and have control over that realm, then they are talking out of their ass. People who really understand the paranormal are those who understand that it is in a realm way beyond that which we can understand. That doesn't make it less real, but claiming you can manipulate it is arrogant as all hell. A few days later, I've been getting interested in the lore all around the camp and want to try and map some of the trails that go to the end of the property with GPS. The camp is nearly a century old, and there were old campsites and foundations everywhere. Thought if it would be cool if I could map where they all were, as older, decommissioned trails and stuff were not marked on the official map. Do a few hikes around the loop to the north with the ruins in the daytime. Looking along the trail for possible old paths, campsites, etc. Get to the part of the loop with the ruins. By now I had been up there plenty in the daytime. Not every time had I gotten that unnerving instinct, but when I did I started to take it more and more seriously. First thing you notice about the ruins area is that the loop's trail bends and goes up a hill, and when you reach the crest of that hill the sound of birds fades. The part of the forest around the ruins is devoid of any noise, birds overhead, animals scurrying around, trees/leaves settling. Even in the daytime, there is a noticeable quiet about this region that is distinguishable from earlier parts of the trail. I end up finding a trail that had been covered up by some sticks. Yellow blazes on trees had been painted over by black paint. Looked like someone had recently decommissioned this trail. Have one of the guys with me stay on the main trail and keep visual contact as I explored what was over there. Hard to explain, but the woods up there feel like they shift sometimes in the daytime. Patches of ferns move around, trails move to different spots, etc. It was protocol every time we explored in this area that any time we deviated from the trail, someone stayed on the main loop so nobody gets lost. I follow the trail about 100 m. There's a clearing, looks like an old campsite, rocks and things not normally placed. Ring of rocks in the middle covered by leaves, looks like an old fire pit. I take pictures and then make my way back to the original trail. Find the possibility of having discovered an abandoned campsite really exciting. Talking about it with the staff. Go to consult Ted. He's also very familiar with the various ruins and abandoned stuff around camp. Ask him about it, show him the pictures, asks him what he thinks it is. Kinda avoids the questions. Tells me to keep it quiet. I don't understand what is going on, really just wanted to see if this was an old campsite. I approach Ted later in the day and ask him again. He pulls me away from the rest of the staff and I show him the pictures again. Starts explaining to me in a hushed voice. There are a whole lot of crazies up here. We've had incidents on the property here and found evidence of some rituals being performed around the property over the years. Look at him dumbfounded and not sure if he's actually serious. Yet, one time we were walking that northern loop and found a bunch of shells arranged like a pentagram. Other times there are candles placed on rocks in the middle of the woods. The crazies around here do some crazy shit. So could you try and keep this quiet from the rest of the staff? We don't want rumors to spread about this. I'm realizing he's being completely legit. Convince him to explore the area again with me. We get back up to the clearing with the rocks, right across the trail from the fire pit where we tell the stories with the campers. He starts uncovering the leaves on top of the circle of rocks. Facial expression changes. It's not arranged like a fire pit, not like a pentagram either, some other formation that was clearly unnatural and ritualistic. Points out a few rocks placed equidistant around the circle. That's where they would put the candles. This is real.jpg. Listen to me. We didn't find this. Nobody is going to hear about this, understood? I nod in shock. We destroy the rock formation and cover up the offshoot trail. Ted talks to the ranger, who lives on the property year-round, as well as some of the really senior staff. All I'm told is that they took care of it. Never talk about it again. That's all I'm going to post for now. I've had a few more experiences but they're really long to explain so I'll save them for later.